The live show will start shortly. Thank you for joining us for another 420 Grow Show. I'm joined by my amazing co-host, The Happy Cultivator, and our star today, Dr. MJ Coco from CocoForCannabis.com. Today, we're going to be talking about lighting conspiracies. You'll see a timer on your screen when the show starts. Make sure you're in the live chat so you can ask Dr. MJ Coco questions you may have wondered about. I know myself, this was a topic that I and many friends are really excited for. Sometimes our biggest enemy in our garden is ourself. Sometimes there's information you think you need, but do you really need it? Is there any point in it? And that's what we're going to talk about today. 18/6 light cycle versus 24-hour light cycle in veg. Let's talk about, do we need 24 hours of darkness before chopping? Is gaslighting really practical? And UV, IR, and far red, what are they, and how much impact do they really have on your garden? Do we need to slowly bring them into flower, or can we just make the jump? There's many more topics like this that we're going to talk about today with Dr. MJ Coco. And if we have time, I would even like to talk about side lighters and sunrise, sunset. But I want to take a moment and say thank you, Dr. MJ Coco, for joining us today. But thank you for also being an amazing mentor and a hero to look up to in the community. You've been very motivated on educating people on the horticulture lighting and also just growing in general. And that's what I want to touch on. We're going to be coming up with a New Year's Grow Challenge over on Coco for Cannabis. So make sure you go over and check out what we have over there. Not only challenges, but community building programs where we talk about lighting together. We have chat rooms and boards and forums and grow leaders. It's such an exciting website over there, and I highly encourage you after this show to go over to CocoForCannabis.com and check out what we have to offer. It's an amazing community, and as Dr. MJ Coco says, grow your own, but don't grow alone. Growers love, and I'll see you in there. If you're not subscribed, consider subscribing. We're only about 5 subscribers away from 2K. We'll be doing our 2K giveaway live here on YouTube, the HempWithGG channel, November 20th at 4:20 p.m. EST. We have many companies coming on to give you guys amazing items. Enjoy the rest of the countdown and consider going to CocoForCannabis.com and joining me this year in the New Year's Grow Challenge. Welcome back, GG family. We're joined here with my amazing co-host. I hope you liked the little bit of change up on the intro. The Happy Cultivator and our star guest here, Dr. MJ Coco. Dr. MJ, welcome.
Of course, I started with my microphone on mute, but thank you, HempWithGG, and thanks for being here. It's a pleasure to be on the HempWithGG and with the Happy Cultivator.
Good to have you, man.
I agree. In the sense of definitely wanting to touch on it, I call them conspiracies. I didn't really ask you how you felt about that title. Do they fall into conspiracies or just kind of grower myth?
Well, it depends on which one we're talking about. I suppose some of them may be conspiracies. But yeah, there's a lot of sort of lore, as it were, like folklore, grower lore, various forms of ideas that have gotten built up into sort of, explanatory models. And a lot of that's what we call bro science, where people are sort of developing their own theories based on their own experiences and then trying to pass that along as sort of wisdom and insight, when the explanatory model really often isn't correct. There's a lot of stuff like that. That was one of the things that I realized in sort of preparing for my last video was, like, we've gone through so much changes in horticultural lighting in particular over the last 2, 3, 5, certainly 10 years, that a lot of sort of the lore that developed in the cannabis grower community through time is really no longer valid. And we've been working on those things for years, like with, the grow light calculator, and thinking about how to think about how much light you need differently and what's a successful harvest differently and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Going over our artillery here, before the show, I was actually looking at it, and it kind of goes in a sense of order in the sense of how you grow. So I guess to start off, to kind of just go right into it, is to start with the germination, vegetation. There might even be a separation there between it, but there's this ideal of 24 hours of light in veg, 16/8 in veg. I know that's going to depend on if it's auto or photo, but could you touch on that kind of broadly if you could?
Yeah. So, I mean, the important thing for photos is that you give them more than 12 hours of light to keep them out of their reproductive phase. As you give them more and more light, you're going to get more and more growth, but at sort of a diminishing rate. So, it's basically the law of diminishing returns. For each marginal unit added, you get a slightly smaller return than the last marginal unit added. So that's one side of it. Like, doing 24 hours worth of light isn't twice as much growth as doing 12 hours worth of light. I mean, assuming the photo period issues weren't sort of problematic to that. But then how much is sort of enough, with 16 hours, or what's the difference between 16 and 18 or 20 hours every day, or 22 or 24? And the other side you can think about it is there a benefit to turning the lights off for some period of time every day? And I think in the end, it's a bit of a compromise. You can certainly grow plants under 24 hours of light. Almost all cannabis plants can do pretty well under 24 hours of light. There are a few strains that seem to not like it sort of in the literature, but I'm not entirely convinced that that's really the issue there. In my experience in sort of like dealing with other growers, they grow fine. They veg fine under 24 hours of light. How much faster is it to veg 24 hours? Like, are you going to be able to shave any time off doing that over a grow that's run on 18 hours?
I guess there's a sense in, is there a benefit to the darkness? I know plants are really trying to survive the darkness, but there's got to be some kind of benefit to letting them rest a little bit in early phases or even in vegetation stage.
I'm not sure it's much of a benefit in letting them rest. I mean, they don't get tired in sort of the way that you or I would if we were like, working all the time. You can think of photosynthesis more like your heartbeat in that sense. Like, it's just going to be beating all the time, whatever. It's not getting tired. It doesn't need to rest necessarily. However, I do believe that having a rhythm to the 24-hour day is helpful to the plants, and I do believe that it makes it less stressful when we do eventually flip them to flowering. So for both of those reasons, like, the only way you can really establish a rhythm for your plants, for the photoperiodism at least, is by giving them a dark period on a consistent basis every 24 hours. It doesn't have to be long, but it has to be consistent. So, you could go 22/2 or 24. 24, where you're on for 20 hours and off for 4, is a pretty common vegetative lighting condition. 18.6 is probably the most common. I use both of them, to be honest with you. If I feel like I'm a little bit behind, I'll be on 20 and 4 just to kind of give them a little kick in the pants, a little bit more energy every cycle. But you're not going to get much out of that. It's not like you're going to even shave a day off of a normal vegetative cycle. Maybe you will. Maybe you'll save a day over the course of a month.
Oh,
right.
Well, I guess in the sense, are you saying there is no negative in the sense of not giving them darkness? Because I will find people that don't actually say they're doing it for growth. They're doing it more for a consistent environment, or it's easier to hold temperatures and not having the swings of, swings are really bad, especially early on in their life, to adjust to something so subtly. So I guess my broad question is, if they have those, I guess, benefits they're getting from it, is there any negative to having 24 hours of light in veg? Would you say you hurt your plant in any way?
Not early. I always start my plants under 24 hours of light when they're like sprouting. Sprouts are under 24 hours of light. And for exactly the reasons you talk about. It's easier to maintain a lot of environmental conditions. This is true for home growers. This is true for large scale commercial facilities. Lights out is the hardest time to control climate. So when the lights go out, it removes the source of heat. The humidity load still stays high. The amount of humidity the air can hold is decreasing as the temperature drops. So it's hard to sort of maintain a climate effectively. If you think about that on like a commercial scale, where most commercial facilities are running a lot of air conditioning, the air conditioning is responsible for a lot of their drying, right? Because the air conditioners are dehumidifiers. And then they're being triggered by the heat from the lights. So when the heat from the lights goes out, the air conditioners are no longer working, and there's all this humidity suddenly, and you need to be able to sort of manage all of that. So whether you're a home grower or a large scale facility, it's easier if you just never turn off the lights for managing climate. For early growth, for seedlings, that's a big advantage. And I don't think there's much of a reason that you have to give them a dark period. I don't think you benefit much from having a dark period. After a couple of weeks, I think it becomes easier. I want to introduce my plants to darkness early. I don't want to sort of surprise them with darkness at the flip. I want to introduce them to it and let them get used to sort of darkness every day. And darkness is a stress for plants. So.
Yeah, no, I think you answered my question on that, and it kind of changes how I even look at my own plants. I've always just done the 18.6, like, let's just get them going, get them started, and I'll handle it in the environment. But in the same sense, large scale, that could get expensive. That could get expensive trying to condition the air, when there could be, I guess, the 24 hours could be beneficial there. But that brings me more towards the gas lighting, which me and Happy were talking before you joined the show. And I told him I think I'll let you explain gas lighting a little bit better. But in the sense I understand it is just interrupting it so it doesn't go to flower, so you use less electricity. Am I wrong on that?
It's basically running 12-12, but in the middle of the 12 hours of darkness, you give them an hour of light. So the actual cycle is 12 on, 5.5 off, 1 on, 5.5 off. And then it repeats.
That's
12
just to save electric, right? There's no benefit to the plant other than saving electric, right?
There's no benefit to the plant. Poor little plant's gonna be confused out of its mind. It's gonna be like, what the hell day is this? What planet am I living on?
I would think it was a hermaphrodite from the light stress. That's basically what you're doing, interrupting the light cycle.
Yeah, but it's during veg. Like, the plant's never been able to enter into reproductive growth. So that's what if you started the gas lamp or the gas lamp routine when your plants had already flowered, you would almost certainly harm them. But no, this is done by, I don't even know who's responsible for promulgating these kinds of lies, but people pass around these banners. It's so easily done. We had a really good grower a few years ago, tried the gas lamp routine and gave up on it after about 6 weeks, because like the plants were just sickly and struggling. I mean, the plants weren't flowering. They were also far from thriving. So no, it's a great way to grow slow, confused plants.
Now, in a sense, there is somebody, Green Kasike here on YouTube, who lives on an island, and his electric is like upwards to 40 cents per kilowatt, which is just madness. So he does practice that, and he's been successful. From what I can see, at least gets
It's
from
not helping him save electricity.
Yeah, that's all.
In the long run. So there's like that kind of thinking depends on, it's like a form of magical thinking where, you know, photons in are carbohydrates out. I mean, photosynthesis is powered by the photons from the light. And if you run the light less or at a lower dimmer setting or less light, whatever, you're going to have fewer photons, you're going to have smaller plants in a pretty much one-to-one relationship. Like, you can't reduce the number of photons by some clever trickeries of the digital timer and expect like the plants are still going to be like as big. So what you end up doing under the gas lamp routine is you just slow your plants down. And now you're just growing them longer to get them to be the same size, which means you got to run everything else longer. You got to run all your climate equipment longer. Your fans, if that's the only climate equipment you're running your fans longer because the plants need X number of hours of light. And if you're only giving them 13 hours a day instead of 18 hours a day, and you're giving it to them in this broken up section that they're not even going to be able to use it effectively, it's going to slow the plants down. You're going to end up using more electricity to grow the same size of plants. There's no reason. The gas lamp routine is done outdoors. I mean, this is where it comes from. It's done outdoors to be able to start planting in the early season before the days are 12 hours long. So, you know, think northern latitudes, short day lengths. You want to plant plants outdoors. But if you did in, say, May, they'd start flowering right away because the days are still so short wherever it is that you're living. So you would go out there and interrupt this supplemental lighting to interrupt the dark period to keep your plants from flowering. And you would do it for a few weeks or whatever in this spring to keep your plants from flowering then. And then they, you know, get a longer day length, and then you'd be able to stop the gas lamp routine. But like, that's sort of why it's called that. Like, I mean, it harkens an image of like taking a gas lantern out to your field and like shining it over your plants in the middle of the night to trick them from, you know, going into reproductive growth. But there's zero applications for doing this in an indoor grow. If you try to do it, you'll end up spending more on electricity. So if you're trying to save money on electricity, no, grow plants efficiently. Focus on growing plants efficiently. And that's literally what I try to do. That's why I wrote Cocoa for Cannabis. That's like what this is all about, is like, how do you maximize those returns? How do you ensure harvest quality? How do you ensure getting to harvest? I mean, what's like a good guaranteed way we're not going to end up with crop failure? All of those things. And I think if you're trying gas lamp routine, you're bringing on far more risk than is really advisable in a situation like that.
Outdoor, it makes a little bit more sense outdoor, in the sense, I guess, for some reason you want it to get an early start, or if you're trying to obviously just extend the light so it doesn't go into flower. But indoor, I think it's your real estate, and you're saying it slows it down. So now you're just spending more time holding up this real estate for the same result you could have got maybe spending a few more cents maybe on electric.
Yeah, and we got to face the reality that if we choose to grow plants indoors, we're paying electricity to grow plants. I mean, we're doing that. And like, if you want to be efficient at doing that, then grow plants efficiently. There's not gimmicks to do it more efficiently. The gas lamp routine is a gimmick, and it's definitely not sort of No, there's a lot of other gimmicks like that too. I don't know if they're conspiracies, man. I mean, maybe. I don't know if anybody is profiting off of this though. Like, I don't know why this stuff persists. Like, it doesn't work. Anybody can try it, and they'll end up sort of struggling with their plants. I don't really understand why it would persist. But I would tell your friend that's doing this that there's probably more efficient ways.
I think the more efficient way to save electric would be, most of when they're in seedling, you don't need your 5x5 lights set up, a 80, 100-watt light and hang it 30 inches from your seedlings and move on with your life. Like, I think there's ways to be more efficient for sure. It's kind of like
I use I use a 150-watt light for seedlings, and I mean, the first few weeks, it's dimmed all the way down. It's drawing less than 30 watts.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's more than enough for seedlings. Yeah,
just shove them in the corner. But that's kind of, I think, what grows all these conspiracies is we hear one piece of truth, and then we want to, I think it's a man thing, and I hate to be sexist on it, but we want to take that plant and rip out the engine and put a V8 in it, and we're going to pour this juice in it, we're going to make it faster, and then they try to back it up with this little piece of science truth. They just run away with it. Same thing with the green light. Green light's not photosynthesized, and then they're like trying to use it and to look at their plants in the dark. It's like, how did we get to this point now? Or even with blurples, red and blue is really important, and they really just jack up those two, and it's like, what about the meat in the middle?
Right.
So, yeah, I think
exactly. Although, strictly in terms of photosynthesis, blurples do pretty well. Like, the real big issue with blurples, as I pointed out in my video, is it's just damn near impossible to see the plants under blurples, and that makes plant pest identification, plant nutrient stress identification, all of those things about sort of like how your plants are doing. But
I started with blurples when I joined your site. I used to have to turn off the blurples and turn on an overhead light to even take pictures for my journal or look at the plant.
Exactly. And it's funny because, all of us have been growing for at least the last 3, 4, 5 years or so. Remember blurples, and remember, like, the first thing in any forum, you'd have to be like, okay, can you take a picture of the plant under normal lighting conditions? Like, because you can't see crap under this. Yeah. Berkshire Bud, our good friend Berkshire Bud took this footage that I included in my video. But I joked with him about it. Like, we can't even tell what plant this is. So I put it on the screen there, right? Like, what is that?
Yeah, I'm surprised you didn't get monetized. They're like, that might be cannabis. We can't tell.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's why I wanted to make it really clear. Like, okay, it's not cannabis, everybody.
But your video,
Berkshire was telling me, he's like, people are going to be asking me for a cut of my crazy new cannabis plant.
Yeah, you know what? I was tricked when I was, a new grower. I did see these beautiful plants and didn't realize it was the color of the light being put on them. So it's funny he says that. And that kind of walks us into another conspiracy, because now we're kind of moving towards flower, as we've talked about the germination and the gaslighting during vegetation. As we move into flower here, we talked briefly on, how important dark is, or if there's a benefit. Is there a benefit to actually walking your plants into flower before switching right to 12-12 on a photo period?
Well, I think it's less stressful, for sure. Darkness is stressful for plants, and plants need plants prepare for it, and they store energy to survive the dark period, and they anticipate how long the dark period is going to be. So if you suddenly and dramatically increase the length of the dark period, the plant's literally not ready for that. And it causes an unnecessary stress reaction. So this is why I introduced dark periods to vegetating plants, is to get them accustomed to it. And then as we, approach the flowering period, I'll increase the dark period by just 2 hours a day. And always at the lights off time. So the lights go off 2 hours earlier than the plants were anticipating them going off, but they come back on at the same time every day. That sort of like anchor in their schedule never changes. Lights on is like always the same.
I like the way you explained that, because I was kind of under the conspiracy we were in a way trying to imitate what Mother Nature does over 3 months in a week's time, and it's like that doesn't sound right. But now the way you're explaining it, just more about it's easing into, it's not really replicating, it's more just, hey, let's try to test this out a little bit, kind of like hardening off a seed.
What do you mean by that?
Hardening off a seed in the sense of, let's say you're going to bring a plant outside. That seedling in your greenhouse, you might put it near a window that's open, or open a vent.
Yeah. Okay, so hardening off a little seedling, for sure. Yes.
Just in the same sense, you're not imitating it, but you're at least easing it into the ideal of it. And that's kind of the same with your saying.
Yeah. And that just brings up another point. I don't think in indoor horticulture, we're always trying to sort of imitate what Mother Nature does outdoors. In a lot of cases, we're going to be sort of a poor comparison. But in a lot of other cases, we can actually do things that are more efficient or produce better results. Stationary lighting, for example, like the sun's moving around, the plants aren't sort of optimized to receive the photons as well as they can be in an indoor grow. The exact PPFD levels that the plants like for optimizing growth, we can dial that in and give it to the plants like the entire lights on period, basically, for optimized growth. That never happens outdoors, right? Outdoors, like dawn and dusk are not enough PPFD, and right in the middle of the day is too much. So there are some things that we can actually do better than an outdoor sense. In an outdoor sense, though, there really is, all plants are evolved to grow outdoors. And so we're sort of working with those evolutionary mechanisms that evolved when plants were living outdoors. And yeah, the seasons change like a couple minutes on both dusk and dawn every day. Very gradual transition into flowering. The plant doesn't need to be shocked. Like, hey, now it's like dramatic darkness. Some people plunge their plants into like 24 hours of darkness at the flip. And they're like, it speeds things up. I'm like, your plant is like super perceptive on how long the dark period is. You don't have to like give it 5 times more darkness than it wants in order to like convince it that it's the dark period. That's just a huge unnecessary stressor for the plant right at what's about to be sort of the most stressful time for the plant. So yeah, I try to specifically avoid doing that. The transition from vegetative growth cycle to a reproductive growth cycle is always going to sort of stress the plants out a little bit. And, you just want to take it easy on them. If you want them to be growing as efficiently as possible, you want to minimize the stressors.
I'm glad you explained it better that way, because I was stuck on that kind of like they're trying to make up outdoors, and they're really not. That we're trying to, if anything, us even giving it, I guess, that change over a shorter period of time, at least that change isn't drastic like outdoors, but that change might be a frost overnight. So we're able to make that change actually a little more smoothly than you would outdoors.
Climate's the other real big thing in terms of what what indoor growers can excel at. It requires having the equipment most of the time, but yeah, we can control climate and really dial in climate for optimal growth. So
yeah, climate's important, especially coming on our harvesting season here. I've seen, sadly, a few of my neighbors end up with mold and, water issues because you're either in the frost or you're in the rain at the end. And that's just how a photoperiod's life goes outside. Indoors, we change that, and they're getting optimal light at a time that they usually are losing light over the transition into the fall and so on and so forth.
Right.
So we can control a lot in there, and I think we try to do too much.
Yeah, and even though the sort of duration of the light is decreasing, the density of the light doesn't have to decrease. So I really believe that because we can control more of these things, we have the ability to grow better plants indoors.
Well, on the sense, I think we've talked about how we're trying to avoid stress, but in a sense, as we get closer to that chop, growers tend to want to induce stress, and there's plenty of ways: ice cubes, pencils through the stems, and I think the most common kind of misconception is the 48 hours of darkness. I shouldn't say misconception, but what is your opinion on keeping it in the dark on the vine, still growing in a sense, I guess.
Yeah. You know, a little bit of like COC history here. Our very first time we ever did a group challenge grow was to like do this darkness before harvest challenge that we were all gonna keep our plants or keep one plant in darkness before harvest and harvest the other one on time. We ended up having a lot of other issues with that grow. But a few things on this. One, I think that it's important to harvest cannabis, like a lot of other crops, by the way, after a dark period. So you don't go into like the tent when the lights have been on for 6 hours and chop down your cannabis plant. You go in to chop down your cannabis plant at the end of a dark period. So the question then, as long as we sort of agree on that point, we can elaborate more on that point if you want. But is there any benefit to extending that dark period beyond sort of what would normally be a 12-hour dark period? So if we agree that we're going to harvest at the end of a dark period, you know, dark periods at that time are 12 hours each. Should I make it longer than 12 hours? Should I leave the plants in the dark for, say, 24 hours or 36 or 48 hours? So which side should we talk about? Should we talk about the point?
It should be chopped at a dark, at, you know, darkness before the light comes on. We agree on that. But the question is how long you extend that darkness and what benefits there are. And I did practice that myself. I did do a 48-hour, left it on the vine, and I think the only, I guess, benefit you could say I've seen was, you know, the soil dried back too far and it started drying on the vine. That's, if you want to call that a benefit, you pre-dried, but I don't think there's, from what I've seen throughout my tests, that there's any change in anything. If it's fire bud going in, you know, if you put it in 40-hour darkness, it's still going to be fire cannabis. You know, you can't turn trash into good, and I think that's again where we get these like secret fixes. Like if my bud's trash, I'll just leave it in 48 hours of darkness.
I mean, any of this sort of like the bacon finishing phenomena, right? Where like bacon continues to cook even after you take it off the pan because like the grease that it was cooked in is still hot, and the grease that is basically still cooking the meat even after you take it away, right? So there's some of that to cannabis. I mean, for sure, like the plant continues to mature in a certain sense even after it's been chopped. A limited amount. The other side of this is I don't think you're going to do a lot of damage either, unless you really extend it. I think you could start doing damage by going to 48 hours. If you went beyond 48 hours, I think you're really risking the plant starting to sort of cannibalize itself for energy, moving things around in ways that aren't going to improve your harvest quality.
But we both agree there's something.
An extra 12 hours, I don't think that's going to make much of a difference. And what I would basically do, like if the end of your dark period is say 10 o'clock at night, and you're like, I don't want to have to harvest at 10 o'clock at night. So, well, then leave them in the dark until the morning and harvest then. That type of a move, I think, is fine. I don't think you're going to do a lot of damage, but I don't think you're going to get any benefit really at all from extending the dark period beyond sort of that normal 12 hours.
Well, we both agree, and something I've always done, but I guess I don't know the science behind it. And in the same sense, Crispy saying, you know, chop before the sun comes up. What is I do it, but what is the reason of why we want to wait until a dark cycle has happened to chop in the first place? Because that's what we're feeding off of here in this whole ideal of extending it. So what are we gaining by it?
There's a number of crops that are harvested right before the sun comes up. And for various reasons. So either the concentration of sugars in the fruit or the concentration of various types of like vitamins, basically, in different vegetables and things like that. Wine grapes, for example, are always harvested in the pre-dawn hours because they'll have the maximum sugar content. Spinach is always harvested. Well, it should be. It's not always, but it should be harvested in the pre-dawn hours because it'll have a lot more iron in it. spinach that's harvested later in the day moves throughout the plant, sort of moves these things around itself during the course of a 24-hour cycle. So I can't remember what it was. There has been studies on this, though, lab testing results from cannabis harvested at different times in relation to the dark period.
I may be butchering this, but in the sense to give growers kind of their voice, from what I hear a lot is there's resin production at night. Is that a true statement, or is that some gross?
Yeah, there's some synthesis of resin and other sort of cannabinoid bearing elements. You know, the trichomes can be maturing or developing during the dark period. And then when the lights come on, they get sort of zapped off, right? So allowing the lights to turn on burns off some of the cannabinoids, burns off some of the trichomes, essentially. So that was always one of the arguments for extending the darkness, is like, let these things continue to build for a longer period of time. And, you know, the lights never come on, so the lights never sort of burn any of that stuff off. However, and I think I was reading, Small pointed this out a little while earlier in the chat, and I almost started to describe this when we were talking about flipping the flower, but the plants store energy to survive the darkness. And by the end of their anticipated dark period, they're out of energy. Like, they've used 95% of the energy that they stored to survive that dark period by the time the lights should come on again. And so if the lights don't come on again, the plant's running on fumes. The idea that, you know, leaving it in the dark for the next 12 hours is going to like be able to continue production. No, the plant actually goes into sort of a shutdown mode because things aren't happening the way it wanted to, and it's running out of energy. So it goes in sort of emergency mode. It may have to reallocate energy for other things to that. And that's why I say it's going to start cannibalizing itself and doing things that really probably won't contribute to a higher quality harvest. So,
in that same sense of stressor, because that is, I guess, one of the categories of stressors, do you even want to make any statements on the ice in the bucket and the pencils through the stems and drilling it and splitting it in half? Like, that's all just some craziness, right? Am I wrong? I see you grinning.
I mean, there's been very little of these things have been scientifically studied. What I can say is sort of, a couple of things. If you do this close enough to the time that you murder the plant, it's probably not going to do any damage, because like, if you pour ice on your plant and then 6 hours later, like, murder the plant by chopping it down at the stalk, not too much has happened in that period of time. Now, if you're giving ice water to your plants like at the end of week 6 because like you think there's something going on there, that might be a different issue. So my big caveat here is, you know, there's some crazy things that you want to do to your plants. Do them like right before you chop your plants, and you're going to limit the damage considerably. The other side of this is we do have some evidence that strategically stressing plants can, you know, lead to improved quality. Not so much improved yield, but to improved quality. And I mean, the problem with that is we don't know a lot about exactly how to be strategic with how we stress the plants, but there's always sort of the possibility that some of these things could stress the plants in a way that led to better quality cannabis. But be aware, it's not going to be more cannabis. There's nothing I've ever heard in terms of these late harvest or, you know, late flowering tricks or whatever are going to lead to larger harvests. The idea is always that somehow they're going to lead to better harvests. I think at best they're specious. Like, I really doubt it, but if you do it close enough to the harvest, it's probably not going to hurt. The evidence that we have about things that may work is dry stressing plants a few weeks before harvest. There's been a few studies that look at that. I think that
I think it's the form of
Almost
stress.
all of us are better served. All of us are better served just trying to keep our plants healthy and happy and growing efficiently. Be really good at that, and nobody's going to grow better cannabis than you.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a sense of what stress it is, but in the same sense, in this broad category, it sounds like our job really is to give it what it has outdoor, but at optimal times, not try to push it further than it was, just give it what it has outdoor, but consistently, and it'll probably do better than you trying to stab a pencil through it or throw ice water on it.
I've always heard that it was a nail, like driving like an iron nail through the stalk was going to like give it iron or something.
I've never heard that one. That is kind of
There's a bunch of this folklore, but this is the kind of folklore that doesn't necessarily cause anybody any harm. Again, as long as you're not doing it too early. The flush before the harvest is another one, straight up. I mean, flushing before harvest, whether that's a good thing to do or not, or whether that improves quality, my advice there is the same. Like, just do it like right before you harvest, and you're not going to damage much. Well, we do know that the flush doesn't do what a lot of growers sort of think that it does. I still get messages about like my ash isn't perfectly white. How do I have to change the way I'm flushing or curing or whatever? And yeah,
we had a great question, I think, from Eric, and I didn't even think about it this way, but does going to more darkness make a difference in the last couple of weeks of flower? So are we giving them more darkness in the sense of we were giving them 12-hour darkness, now we're giving them 10-hour darkness? That's the first I've heard of that, going more darkness as you go more into flower.
Well, more darkness would be 14 hours of darkness. Some growers go the other way and go back to a longer day length for the last couple of weeks and sort of cross their fingers that they don't get worms.
I think they mean the other way around. I think they mean
going to No, again, if you reduce the amount of light, you're going to reduce the size of the harvest. There's no two ways around that. So reduce the amount of light is either by giving them less light or giving them less shorter duration. So 10 hours instead of 12 hours is going to lower your yields at a little bit. And to be perfectly honest, that's a point where the plant's putting a lot of its photosynthetic energy into growing its flowers. You don't want to kind of like kneecap it right when it's like putting, 90% of its photosynthetic effort into building the bulk of the flowers.
Yeah, I think I've seen on one of your podcasts when you were growing some autos, and I've seen some of your grows in your grow journal as well. But I believe in one of your podcasts, you were saying that you were thinking about taking the autos off of 24 hours because they were just growing too rapidly. I think that was you. Forget who you were on the show with. Maybe?
That's always the challenge with autos. If you get autos growing really well, they grow too big. I have a hard time keeping autos in my tent, like straight up. So I almost kind of grow them poorly. Because otherwise they'll grow too big. That was one of sort of a famous time lapse I did a while ago in my 4x4. I just had 4 autos, and like they grew past the lights. They grew past as high as I could raise the lights. But they were on long day length, 24, not 24/0, but 20 on, 4 off. They grow like crazy. And if they're happy during the bolt and they're getting 20 hours of light, they just go crazy. So, that idea about at harvest isn't to slow down the growth so much as it's just to not burn off so much of the terpenes. I do say that if you're growing autos under 24 hours, I would introduce some darkness towards harvest. I don't really recommend growing autos under 24 hours to begin with, but I do think that there's a benefit to having some dark period to harvest at the end of, basically. And that wouldn't just be like once.
Yeah, I've always tried to practice that theory of, chopping before the lights come on and after they've had a dark cycle. And
but if you're on 24/0, you never have a dark cycle to harvest at the end of.
Sure. Oh, my phone's trying to do an update. Hold on, I'm going to stop it. All right, my phone tried to do an update. Forgive me. In the sense, me and HappyCultivator were talking before you got on the show that, looking at his beautiful canopy, it's very dense. I I guess I'll touch on kind of a sore topic on the community, which is side lighting. And I know that's a very sore topic. Some people believe in it. Some
Okay. I don't know why it would be a sore topic. Are people upset about it?
Because we can have a conversation, you know, people that are more open-minded can have a back and forth conversation and learn something. But as you know, from many forums, it can become a bit of a my dick's bigger than yours kind of thing, to put it bluntly, a pissing contest. So it's nice to have somebody that can have an open dialogue conversation about
it. Side lighting is just not very efficient. If what you want to do is be efficient, then concentrate on other things. It especially sort of pains me to see people doing side lighting when they don't have adequate overhead lighting. Overhead lighting is far more efficient than side lighting ever will be. And I struggle to believe that side lighting is ever going to be worth the cost of electricity. Not that it's not going to do anything, but it's just not going to do enough to justify its own cost.
You think even a one spectrum, like a sense of a just red light, or are we going more further into that? Let's juice it more. Like just one spectrum in a sense. Because we have seen on my show people come up with just bars that are just, you know, one UV bar or one red bar. And in the sense, I guess let's backtrack a little bit. I have a question kind of relating to my grow. In the sense, my MedicGrow Smart 8 has a bloom button that turns on more reds. Is that something else you got to wait to put on before you go to flower, or you just boom? Okay.
I'd run it all the time. And I think I say that in my Smart 8 review. What's that?
You said all the time, just to close cap that. That's in veg as well, you're saying?
Yeah, I'd run it in veg. I think the reason you wouldn't want to potentially is you want to keep shorter plants. If you really want shorter plants, then, you know, turn the bloom button off. All that bloom button is doing, and all most bloom buttons do, is dim the red lights in the grow light fixture. So most of the time they have 660 nanometer diodes, and the 660 nanometer diodes will be driven by their own driver, and they'll dim that driver. That's essentially what's happening when you hit that, or turn the bloom off. I think on the MedicGrow light, it goes down to like 40% for the 660s. And when you turn the bloom on, it's at like 100% of what they would ever be, right? So, yeah. Now,
would you
a lot of this comes from HPS, the whole MH HPS switch. So basically, if you try to veg plants under HPS really does have too much red and far red. And it makes vegging plants a little too leggy, right? It makes them stretch a little bit too much. So that's why growers used to always use metal halide. Metal halide bulbs are less efficient than HPS, but they'd use them during veg because they have less red light, a bluer spectrum, and the plants wouldn't get so leggy. And then they'd switch over to HPS for flowering because HPS are more efficient.
I think I've actually looked into a little bit of kind of the broad statement you're talking about. Shade avoidance, am I correct? How cannabis is a shade avoidance plant, so kind of the more far red you add, the more internodal stretching you're going to get? Or is that a theory as well?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that happens with all plants. I mean, that's essentially the reason that far red light triggers that, because light that filters through the higher growth is, you know, red shifted. Then red light gets through the plants more, and the lower canopy or a plant growing up under there, because auxins also help the plant sort of understand that I'm getting shaded light because my own plant is shading me out, not some other plant. So when it's some other plant that's shading me out, I'm going to be signaled to grow, stretch, to get up above the other plant. So yeah, that's why far red light shifted stuff. Anyways, let me get back to this stuff, because I think a lot of people think that they use HPS instead of metal halide because HPS is better for flowering, but it's not. HPS simply is more efficient than metal halide. You couldn't use HPS during veg because the plants would get too stretchy. So you had to use a less efficient light during veg, but then as soon as you could, you'd use the more efficient light. And that right there, that little like folklore, I think has affected a lot of people by thinking, I mean, I just got a question today. Does this light have enough red in it for flowering? Because the idea has been like, oh, for flowering plants, we need more red, like the HPS had more red. But the real reason we switched from metal halide to HPS was simply because the HPS was more efficient at creating photons in general. It had the effect of having more red and more far red. But, you know, flowering cannabis plants, and I make this point in my recent video as well, flowering cannabis plants aren't affected much by spectrum changes. Vegetating cannabis plants are affected by spectrum changes, but flowering cannabis plants, not much, as long as you have, like, you know, a spectrum of light that's adequately triggering all the photosynthesis.
It's definitely touching on a lot of topics, but kind of to go back to that side lighting thing, is there any benefit to any kind of spectrum of side lighting? We've kind of eliminated the fact
side
that
lighting. Sorry, I'm back to side lighting. Side lighting is like shining a light at the edge of a piece of paper.
Thank you for covering that.
Right.
Yeah, I steer people away from it, like, that have asked me about it. I don't really know much about it. That's the reason being, but, you know, I appreciate you covering it. It gives a validity to what I've been saying.
Yeah, no, it is. It's just not going to, the leaves are, like, all the chloroplasts in the leaves are spread out across the leaf surface in like almost one cell depth so that they can be a big sort of like reflector. And then you're like shining light at it this way, right? It's just like, it's not meant for that. It's like one cell deep that way. Like the light's meant to be coming at it like this or like this. And this actually came up earlier today. I was listening into the Sundays and Confused show on the Smart Poker channel, and they were talking about underlighting. I think underlighting, which would be, you know, putting lights at the bottom of your tent, like shining up at the plants, is more efficient than side lighting. But the issue there is those leaves aren't expecting it. I mean, they're shade leaves at this point. So you need to introduce plants really basically to side lighting or underlighting slowly and not sort of just cook them with it, because their ability to photosynthesize that light is going to be pretty limited until they get used to it.
Now, where is the kind of cutoff in the sense of, you know, you mentioned shade leaves, in the sense of height, or I guess deepness, how tall can a canopy be before the plants just, no matter how much light you get to it, that just, it's not going to become anything? Like, that's the ideal of side lighting. We're trying to save something. So,
light doesn't have to get to the bud sites in order for the bud sites to grow bud.
Okay, in the sense of, I guess, allocation, does the plant allocate any part of the plant to more focus on? It'd be the top part, right?
Yeah, but if the plant is harvesting enough sort of energy in the canopy to support the amount of bud sites that it has, then it will develop them all. It'll move energy around the plant basically in order to develop those lower bud sites. Now, if it doesn't have enough energy to develop all of the bud sites, then it will prioritize the bud sites that are highest on the plant. But once you're giving it enough light in the canopy that it can more than adequately grow those buds on the top, then it's going to distribute that energy to the lower bud sites. So there's a relationship between how many photons you're harvesting in the canopy and how many bud sites you can support throughout sort of the plant, if that makes sense. But how deep those bud sites are below the canopy is not necessarily the most important factor in this. Other things to keep in mind are, you know, it is a lot of us, you, for example, HempWithGG, tend to grow in a wall-to-wall canopy, right? So plants are only getting light. Yeah, plants are basically only getting light from at the very top. Like the sides are shaded out. If you were in like a larger, say a commercial facility that had benches, you'd have some plants that were in the middle of the bench and some plants that are on like the edge of the bench. And the plants that are at the edge get light along the edge, basically. They're not just harvesting light from the top. They're going to get more light than you get on the edge of those plants, if that makes sense.
I think we've talked about it before, this exact topic, and you made a great point. I thought you were going to say the analogy again of, you feed your mouth to feed your foot. You don't feed your foot kind of analogy. You probably said it way clearer.
Exactly. I like that. I don't remember saying that, but yeah, you feed your mouth to feed your foot. You don't feed your foot directly. I do not remember saying that. That's a good cheat sheet. I'll give you credit for that. Maybe it was another guest.
But in the sense of looking at that tent, you're saying it's wall to wall, and you're saying the light is still getting down to the sides. So there's really not a point to add more light there. Is that what I'm gathering?
It's not so much that you're adding it from the sides, but if you could imagine, there's no walls on that tent. And all those plants are in a big room with a lot of other lights everywhere else. They're going to be getting light coming at the edges of those plants in a way that they're not getting light at the edges of those plants because they're in a tent. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense because they're kind of closed in into the wall instead of getting like a splash over of other light.
Yeah, they're getting the angle of light down. I'm reading the comments in chat. I have to stop doing that because it'll be distracting. I don't know if there's a good way to answer. And the other thing, you should also be aware of how much PPFD you're hitting the canopy with, whether or not you're using supplemental carbon dioxide. So if you're in a standard grow tent with a wall-to-wall canopy and you're dealing with, like around 700 or 800 average PPFD, maybe you're around 1,000 at the maximum PPFD. Yeah, I mean, if you have a canopy depth, meaning like leaves depth of 18 inches, that's going to be probably more than enough in order to harvest all of the photons before they like sort of filter through the canopy and are lost. That doesn't necessarily mean that you can't have lower bud sites.
Yeah,
but having leaves lower than 18 inches below the canopy is probably not going to be helping you much in terms of harvesting photons.
So how do you feel about strippers? You know what I'm saying.
I mean, I'm fine with shaving your legs. I'm fine with shaving your legs, but leave your tops on.
We see people doing
stripping. Okay, you can take off the bottoms, but you got to leave the tops on.
Okay, you're saying lollipop it, but don't go through and just remove leaves to remove leaves. You see the people, I mean, it's just bud sites at the end to stick with a bud site.
Well, there's a difference between a leaf and a bud site. And you can leave the leaf and remove the bud site, or you can remove the bud site and leave the leaf. A lot of people, I think, when they're training, they just go through and indiscriminately cut off nodes, right? Like that whole bud site leaf, thin leaf combination. I very rarely train like that, actually. I usually cut off the bud sites or the growth tips based on sort of how I'm training the plant. And the leaves, yeah, sort of lollipopping them up. So, and this, right? You'll end up with no leaves down below, but a lot of branching because like there used to be leaves there, but there doesn't need to be anymore.
Yeah, that kind of brings me to an important statement that I kind of preach to my community, and I guess you can kind of give me some deeper feedback on it. But I see a lot of people with this ideal, if I remove the leaf and get light to the node side, it's going to magically catch up. And I try to teach more about there is two types of hormones, right? You have your hormone at the top, and then the bottom one's just going to keep kind of doing this stretching technique. So until you can get those both even with each other, you're still going to have two different hormones. Am I touching on too many topics there for you? I'm sorry. But in the sense, people think you can remove a leaf.
There is one leaf in my whole entire sort of training protocol. There is one leaf that I cut off because it's blocking a growth tip.
But that isn't to bring it up. Is that going to help it catch up to the higher nodes, or is that just to get light exposed to the top?
Well, I tell you exactly what leaf it is. It's the internal leaf on the second node after the first top on a manifold.
The one on the
so manifold, you top it, and then you got like these two coming off the top, and then the first node, you're going to leave that branch growing. And then the second node, because the first node's coming off the sides, right? The second node is coming off the inside and outside. And this internal leaf will like come right over and like cover up that growth tip, which you're leaving. Like the first one, you want that first growth tip to grow. So you don't want it to get shaded out early. No, it won't catch up to the apical growth tip, but it'll be stronger than it otherwise would have if you had sort of left it shaded out.
Well, yeah, there's definitely a difference in defoliating to defoliate and actually selective defoliation, where you're right, you do kind of get some of those growths.
It's like the one leaf, though. I mean, seriously, that's like the only leaf I ever cut off because it's blocking a growth tip. And the only reason is because I want that growth tip. This is early in training, and I want it to get growing fast. It's already at a disadvantage, and I want there to be parity among the plant. Like later on, when the plant's a larger plant, I'll never cut a leaf just because it's blocking a growth tip. Like it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other at that point.
Well, you kind of touched on another topic a little bit further back on this exact topic of when I actually first started getting into growing, I fell into the myth of you have to take that leaf where you cleaned out your node site or the node grows back because that leaf is there. That's definitely, yeah, I see you. You freak out.
I cut the tips that leave the leaves. Yeah, that's actually where leave the leaves started. And then we started using leave the leaves for like, don't defoliate. But cut the tips, leave the leaves. When I'm doing my manifold training or my mainline training early on, and you know, you don't want every branch that the plant's going to try to grow. You only want some of the branches. So I'll cut those other tips off right away, but absolutely leave the leaves. Because if you cut off all the leaves, you're going to have like a 4-leafed plant. And a 4-leafed plant is not going to grow very fast. It's only going to have 4 leaves to be harvesting energy. Yeah, so
that's a great way to put it. Looking at it as a mainline, you're right. You'd probably only have those 4 or maybe 6 leaves that would be left up there.
Oh my God, some people absolutely mainline their plants, and after the first topping, all they have left on their sad little plant are like 2 fan leaves and like 2 little tiny sets of leaves on like the top of those growth tips, and it's just like there's no leaves on that plant. Like plants need leaves in order to photosynthesize.
I did that in the plant training challenge over on Cocoa for Cannabis.
Oh, you
yeah, that was my first. It was my second.
That slows them down a lot.
It was my second grow, and my first. I was trying to find a picture, but yeah, I had that. You described to me, so where I stripped everything down and made it look a bit weird. Before we kind of touch on
so cut off the growth tips early. If you're doing that mainline training, cut off the growth tips early, because otherwise they're just going to become a sink of energy that the plant will invest elsewhere. So you don't want the plant to spend all this energy growing out branches that you're not going to keep. So cut them off early, but leave the leaves, because the leaves will then just distribute their energy to the other parts of the plant. There's no reason to cut off the leaf with the growth tip.
I definitely want to jump to Cocoa for Cannabis about our grow challenge, but I also want to touch on, you made a broad statement in your last video about lighting, about UVB being pointless, and you did that bravely. So I'm glad that you put that out there and you took the first step.
I got some pushback from that pretty quickly. That was funny. I got pushback from that from Lettuce Star, who I was collaborating with on this video too. They didn't want me to say that because they like make UV diodes and they sell UV diodes, and they're like, wait, there's reasons for UV, and I'm like, okay, then tell me them. Like let's go through it and show me the science, because if you think there are, I'd love to. And they're basically like, okay, well, we're not going to push back on that point too much anymore. So they kind of cop to that as well. There's just there's 2 things. One, they're really not efficient. So even if you want to use UV light, there are better ways to get UV light than from UV diodes, particularly UVB diodes, the shorter wavelength diodes. But the other side of that is there's no reason to suspect that we want to use UV light. There's a lot of lore about UV. There's no science that backs this stuff up. So there's a lot of ideas about what it does at this or what it does at this, or it helps change colors, or it helps increase cannabinoids. And the studies that have actually looked at it have shown that usually it leads to a lower quality harvest. Now, there may be ways, just like there are ways to selectively drought stress crops that lead to, higher cannabinoids. There may be ways that we discover to sort of selectively use UV light to improve harvest, but I don't think we know what that is yet. I mean, I know we don't know what that is yet. And I'm just trying to be generous by saying that might exist. Well,
that kind of touches on
at this point, there's certainly the real thing here is I have growers come up to me and be like, I'm thinking about this light or this light, but this light has UV diodes and this light doesn't. So I'm thinking about going with this light. I'm like, oh my God, like definitely not. Like that's not a real reason to get one light or another light. So that's my bigger point in all of this, really. Most of these lights that even if they include a UV diode, they include like one or a few, and so few micromoles of UV light are produced that like whether or not it's good or bad for the plants is almost irrelevant if all we're talking about is like the UV diodes that they add to some grow lights, because there's almost no UV coming out of them. It's just a marketing gimmick. It's just putting a couple of really underperforming UV diodes, sending almost no power to them just so you can say that you have them on the grow light. But then you'll come across some people that are selling UV strips or UV bars or other things that are designed to be cultivation lights, not sort of like sterilization lights or other things like that, right? But there's no science to support sort of how we should use that stuff.
Well, that was my question, if there was any data to back that up, because we're trying to, I guess, imitate what happens outside again, right? There's UV out there.
There is. But again, there's a lot of things out there that aren't necessarily good for the plants.
That's well said in one sentence.
Hold on a second. I just got to adjust my curtain here.
Yeah.
There we go. So, I mean, just because something happens outdoors doesn't necessarily mean that we want to recreate that thing indoors, like a frost in September. It doesn't mean like, oh yeah, but this happened outdoors. And it's like, okay, great. But it didn't help anybody's plants become better. UV happens outdoors too. Now, the really shorter wavelength light hopefully isn't reaching sort of the surface of the planet in large doses, but certainly UVA reaches the planet, and it's photosynthesized too. And so if all we're talking about is UVA light, like 385, 395 nanometers or whatever, I don't think that's a big problem. I don't think you're going to get anything special from it. It is pretty photosynthetic. So you are going to get yield and stuff out of there. But again, LED diodes are not efficient at creating that shorter wavelength light. So,
to kind of be the, I guess, devil advocate, and it's kind of going back to the whole idea of stress. I personally, let's first off say I've tested a UV light and I've tested a light $500 cheaper than it, and I would have taken the $500 cheaper. I didn't see a big difference in the UV. But to be a little bit of an advocate, I've heard of people actually using UV in what they call a smash grow, where they're really just looking for resin production, and that's kind of that stress-related thing they're saying. You're adding the UVB to somehow increase a stress-related event to cause resin to stack up. You've heard of it, I'm sure.
That's what some of the studies have tried to look at, and what they've actually gotten is less resin and lower cannabinoid concentrations from using all sorts of different dosages of UV light. So I understand why people want to use it. What I'm saying is we don't have any scientific evidence that suggests that it's going to work for doing those things, for increasing resin, for increasing cannabinoids, for changing color, for doing a lot of these other things that people do. It's certainly not at the, again, I mean, yeah, what dose are you talking about sort of providing your plants with of UV light to?
I think you have a perfect quote for the show. You said just because it happens outside doesn't mean it's good. I think that's perfect, because people use ice to say it's, oh, this is when the frost happens outside, or I'm going to, do some kind of special lighting because this is what happens outside. I think you quoted it beautifully. Just because it happened outside don't mean it's good.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't mean that it's a good thing for the plant. Like a lot of things, like, plagues of locusts happen outside too. It doesn't mean that they're good for the plants, or that like there's something that we want to recreate in our cultivation spaces.
Yeah, I heard of people actually tricking the cannabis plant into thinking it's being attacked by a bug or a species to then correlate in more somehow production. Is that a true statement? I know I'm hitting you with a lot of stuff.
It's a true statement that people do that. That people think, I mean, that's one of the arguments for defoliation is it's like an animal attacking and it's going to make the plant put out more leaves and stimulate growth and these different things. Plants prefer consistency. Plants are sort of like, I mean, they've got a budget, right? And they're planning their budget. They're allocating their budget throughout the sort of growing season. And if you do a bunch of things that sort of screw around with the plants and make them spend their budget in ways that they weren't expecting, it's going to adversely affect your yield and your quality, I think, more than it's going to successfully to encourage it.
It's in the same sense of us removing the bottom half, not making it spend the energy on the bottom half. Why would we want to make it now spend its energy on dealing with our stress factors? So,
well, hold on. Yeah, for bud sites, we don't want to leave lower bud sites that aren't going to, that the plant doesn't have enough energy to fully develop.
Correct.
Because bud sites, the flowers are a sink of energy. And, energy from other parts of the plant go to the flowers and stay there forever. The flowers don't really become sources of energy or release their stuff back to the rest of the plant. It just goes there to die. Leaves, very early in a leaf development, a leaf is a sink, but where, in other words, it's using energy from the other parts of the plant in order to grow itself. But leaves become sources pretty early, and they never go the other way. Once a leaf sort of grows to become a source of energy, it does not take energy from the rest of the plant. So leaving the lower leaves on a plant isn't going to sort of rob the plant of energy. The reason that we end up cutting them is because it makes it easier for us to manage the climate. Leaves, whether or not they're photosynthesizing, will transpire. And so water's getting sort of evaporated out of them, right? And if they're not being used for photosynthesis, they're not really helping us much, but they are still contributing to humidity in the tent. So one of the main reasons that we do that, sort of trimming up the skirts, the lollipopping, is just to make climate easier to manage. We're not, it's not suffering photosynthesis at all because those leaves aren't photosynthesizing anyways, and cutting them off just sort of reduces the amount of transpiration that the plant is putting off. Anyways, I wanted to just clarify on that point.
Yeah, and leaving them down there also, it definitely helps with airflow. I'm sorry, removing them actually helps with airflow, but also if you leave them down there near that soil, especially those lower ones, sitting on the soil, you do tend to create an environment for bugs. And that kind of brings me to my question of, from School of Crop, do you feel like bugs can attack healthy plants?
Yes.
Just because they're healthy, they're still going to get attacked, right? If that environment...
100,000%. 100,000%. And in fact, there's sort of better evidence that bugs prefer to attack healthy plants because there's like sort of more in a healthy plant to eat than there would be, in like a sick or otherwise problematic plant. Now, healthy plants also have better defense systems, but yeah, this is something our good friend Matthew Gates, who goes by Zentanol and Sink Angel, it gets him on a twist when people say that, because absolutely, like, healthy plants with high Brix readings can get aphids and whiteflies and fungus gnats and spider mites, all sorts of other pests, for sure.
I could see that. In the sense of going kind of back to UV, since UVA, I've heard a lot about it in the last 5 months, where people are saying it's very dangerous. You gotta turn it off before you go inside. Is this like some kind of
UVC?
Is it UVC? So, okay.
Yeah, or even UVB. UVB will give you nasty burns. UVA is sort of almost visible. So This is all shorter and shorter and shorter wavelength. So UVA 400 is like violet light. 400 nanometers is violet light. 400 to like 410, I think, is considered violet. Shorter than 400 is considered ultraviolet. Those wavelengths that are, you know, I think the cutoff's about 350, although it varies, different sources, basically depending on why they're drawing a distinction between UVA and UVB. But the higher wavelength UV light acts photosynthetically pretty much like the violet and the blue light in terms of how active it is, especially above 380 nanometers. It's pretty much photosynthetically active as any other light is at that point. So as you get shorter and shorter, like you're no longer photosynthetically active. UVB is no longer photosynthetically active. A lot of UVB diodes are about 310 nanometers. UVC is shorter than that. So I think like 305 is UVC in most scales. Anything shorter than 300 nanometers is UVC. That's dangerous. UVC light will burn you. It'll screw up your eyes. It can, you know, cause damage. So we definitely need to be worried about UVC. UVC is almost exclusively used for sterilization, for like killing microbes and killing pests and stuff like that. So some cannabis growers use UVC for sterilization purposes, but it's never going to be found in grow lights, for example. Grow lights often have UVA diodes. If they're advertising that they have UV, it's usually UVA diodes. And like from horticultural perspective, it's fine. They're reasonably photosynthetic. They're not going to do any damage to the plants, but they're not efficient at all. You'd rather have blue diodes. You'd rather have full spectrum diodes. You'd rather have 660 nanometer diodes, which are all much more efficient than these UVA diodes. You're not getting anything special with them. You're just getting some inefficient light when you get UVA diodes. UVB diodes are like terrible. It goes from like 65% efficiency for a UVB diode to 5% efficiency for a UVB diode. So it's just terrible.
Sterilization, though, and since you say that, there was a article I was briefly reading through where they were, I'm not going to say the spectrum, it was a UV though. They would wait till dark and then they drive this like tractor over the plants, and this UV is supposed to kill powder mildew or something like that.
It's UVC.
UVC.
And the reason they're driving a tractor over is because nobody wants to be in there with the UVC light.
Because it's dangerous. And you said you can't find that in a grow light anyway, so we're not really worried about that like the way I'm seeing it on.
But no, some growers do use it. So it's important to sort of remind everybody what it is. And some growers hear about UV light that's dangerous. UVB light's dangerous too, guys, let's be fair. But UVC light, yeah, it really needs to be avoided at all costs.
I definitely appreciate all the topics you've touched on, and sometimes I avoid topics because maybe I don't know well enough, or I think there's going to be a different opinion. And with you, you know, showing your face and really just putting big topics out there really pushes me to be a little more transparent on my thoughts as well. So I appreciate that. And in the sense of cocoa for cannabis, we know who Dr. MD Coco is. Could you tell us? I was looking today. This is why I asked. I was looking today on the Google and your site and everything, and I was like, what is cocoa for cannabis? I was trying to like put it into a synapse, and it just became too long. At the end, I had a 10-minute video. So that's why we ended up with that 4-minute intro, because I went on a tangent. So
I appreciate that intro, by the way. I was like, wow, this is really nice. He went to like a lot of work to make a little intro for our show. So that was cool. Cool.
Could you, I guess, answer my question I've been fondling in my head? Is there any way to really say what cocoa for cannabis is in a short statement? I don't think
it is several things, I suppose. You know, on the one hand, and we've always thought of it as being, there's sort of two sides to cocoa for cannabis. One side is a resource, and that includes like the book and all the articles online and the guides, the Grow Light Guide, the Grow Light Calculator, you know, those kind of resources about growing in cocoa, about training your plants, about lighting, all those sort of articles that, and I put together most of them, but, you know, I'd help with some. So there's the Cocoa for Cannabis as a resource. And then there's certainly Cocoa for Cannabis as a community, right? And all of the people that are involved in Cocoa for Cannabis and all of the things that we do. So that includes the Growers Forum and the Grow Challenges and the chat room and, you know, all of the community events and stuff that we do. So there's two sides to it. And, you know,
it's tough, right? Yeah, I see.
Yeah, well, we've thought about, I wanted to talk a little bit about sort of like how we've tried to incorporate that into the design of some things, but we've been thinking about sort of redesigning and trying to revamp some of the things that we do, stay sort of, you know, current with the times, as it were. Cocoa for Cannabis isn't that old. We just celebrated our 4th anniversary, like at the beginning of September. So, but still, we need kind of to keep things fresh and updated. But there is a logic that's sort of between those two sides. So we call this the science and practice of growing cannabis, and that refers to all the resources. And then the, you know, grow your own, but don't grow alone. Let's grow together. That's our motto for the community side of Cocoa for Cannabis.
Yeah, and in the sense of Cocoa for Cannabis, I came over there as a soil grower, and I found just as much help. So the name kind of gives a different idea.
Yeah, we love soil growers, you know, DWC growers, you know, outdoor, indoor, hydro, cocoa, soil, aeroponics, however you want to grow your plants. And that's why we've decided again to do our New Year's Grow Challenge, which I saw you talking about as well. Big part of our community is the New Year's Grow Challenge. And we're going to do that based on the different media that everybody grows in. So we have the soil peat group, we have the cocoa group, you got it there on the screen, yeah, the water group, and the misfits. And everybody's welcome. You know, we have an entire group for all of these different medias. A lot of people think that we're just about sort of growing in cocoa, but definitely not. Everybody's welcome, and it's really interesting to see the different groups, I think, in the NYGC when we do it based on media like that. And, you know, get to see how different kinds of media perform, and just make sure everybody feels welcome from sort of regardless of how they're planning to grow.
Yeah, in the sense, I guess, touching on, this is a conspiracy show, late night. Soil peat, I see you kind of grouped them together.
Yes. So soil isn't peat. Peat is what most growers grow in, and most growers that grow in peat think or say or describe themselves as growing in soil. And last year, I thought it would be fun to try to separate that, and sort of, I think it just led to more confusion than anything else. But peat is, I'm not making this up, by definition, soilless. So growers that grow in a peat-based media often say that they're growing in soil, but peat is soilless. It's a hydroponic form of growing in peat. Now you can amend that. You can do all sorts of different things to that. But it's not soil in the sense of what we mean in horticulture. When we refer to soil, we refer to a mineral-based media that is comprised of sand, silt, or clay. And like soil agronomists talk to you about the percentage of sand and clay in silt in your soil, and whether it's a sandy loam or a clay loam or whatever it is. I mean, you ask anybody, any cannabis grower that says they're growing in soil, like, okay, well, what percentage is sand, what percentage is clay, and what percentage is peat? And they're going to come back with 0, 0, and 0. I mean, they're just growing in peat, which is, we call it the one thing mineral. It's an organic base. So there's a difference. And again, last year I decided it would be fun to like basically use the NYGC groups to teach everybody about this difference. But really, it just confused a bunch of people, and they ended up signing up for the wrong group or having us, you know, come back and trying to move their journal into the correct group because they didn't want to be wrong and a bunch of stuff like that. So this year I decided, let's just put them all, because nobody's actually growing in soil anyways. Let's put them together, and maybe just the fact that we put the hyphen will make people think like, oh, is this soil or is this peat or is there a difference between them?
Now, what is Misfits? Is that like a hybrid? People mixing cocoa with soil and DWC? Like, I didn't even read it. What is it?
Misfits. Some people just identify best as a misfit, whether that's in this channel or in life in general. So we try to create space where they'll feel welcome in our challenges. Yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, I suppose if you were growing aeroponically, maybe if you're growing in rock wool, yeah, I think although hydro, I guess you'd call that hydro.
But you do have people mixing stuff. Like I see in my field of grow with the peat, or we'll call it soil for now, with the soil, I see people now doing this like hybrid where they have the soil at the top, but then they have a wicking like DWC res, like a living res in the bottom. And I guess that would definitely fit in the Misfits, because I don't understand. I know it's a wicking system, but it just seems so taboo to hold two different zones. We're talking about the plant training challenge, is why we're off topic of the life.
Yeah, or like a cracky jar or something. There's some weird ways to grow plants, man. I mean, and I certainly encourage people to show up and grow with us in the plant training grow challenge and try some of them. And there's a whole group just for you. You see, you've thought of like half a dozen different ways to be a misfit just right now. Yeah.
But it gets interesting for sure, the kind of stuff that growers can come up with. But in this sense, I think it's encouraged in this grow to maybe show us something weird. I'd like to see what's in Misfits.
If you want to join the Misfit group and show us something weird, I think there'd be a bunch of people into that. But this is also a good time where if you're a cocoa grower, you can join the cocoa grow and see how you're doing compared to a bunch of other cocoa growers. If you're a DWC grower, you can join the water group and see how your plants sort of stack up. You have a whole group of people where you can ask questions, compare notes, compare methods, all that stuff. It's fun. We all start on the same day on January 1st. So be sure to kind of get your grow calendars lined up for that. And
that side challenge from me. I think that was another problem with when we had that side challenge, was explaining what we meant by, you know, a one cola plant. Isn't that the side challenge? Did we decide on that?
We're doing the one cola challenge again. I really like it. And what I got to say is, you know, if your plant looks like it has more than one cola, then it's not going to win. That's my answer. Anybody asks, like, what does it mean to be a one cola plant? It's got to have one cola. So like you cut off all the side branches, and there's always, I understand, like, well, how much do you have to cut them off? Well, it's got to look like one cola. Like if you come up with if you get your buds dense enough that you can leave like little 3-node branches and then like little 2-node branches, and it's all dense enough that it just looks like one massive, like, I give you credit for that.
I know there's prizes for that, and there's prizes for other things like Best Grow Me and everything. Could you tell us a little bit based on, I know we want community, but there is a little bit of a prize side to this. How's that kind of work?
Yeah, we do. Well, we don't do it as a competition. These grow challenges are collaborations. We want everybody to grow together and enjoy sort of cheering each other on and rooting for each other's success and sharing tips and tricks with each other and helping each other out through difficult moments and stuff like that. So we don't want to put each other into like a cutthroat competition where you're rooting for everybody else to fail, right? That said, there's still prizes. Like we like to do prizes for best journal. We do a prize for best grow me. We do a prize for best recovery. We're going to do an opening giveaway. We got some of the AirPod transplanter sets, or you got the AirPod germination cells and then the number 3s. I've been using them on my last several grows, and it's such a joy to sort of transplant out of the germination cells. You just unscrew the screw and you unwrap it, and you got like your little plug and you put it right in the next pot. And so we got those to give away, and, you know, we'll probably do a photo challenge or something, but we've decided to really redouble our efforts on just growing together and making, you know, thinking about emphasizing that side of the challenge more than just sort of the giveaways and the prizes and stuff that we've often maybe focused on too much. I don't know. I like doing prizes and giveaways too. But
I think people are hungry to see you grow, though. I think I alone this week probably had 15 people message me asking, does he grow? I say he has a grow journal over on Cocoa for Cannabis, but are you going to join us for this challenge?
I got to come clean at some point about what's going on with my PTGC. Somehow I've managed to avoid having to answer any questions. I guess you guys are all just being too respectful, and you don't want to have to ask me these questions about what's going on with my PTGC, but it's going. I have plans. I was very late on the flip, so I'm behind, and that's a little bit embarrassing to be like late for your own flip. But I had out of town guests and a number of other issues that sort of set the plants. Well, I just didn't have enough time for them.
We show the good, the bad, and the ugly. You know, Smart Poker and Crispy kind of.
No, I know. I mean, really, I haven't had much time. And working on getting that diode video out was like all of my creative effort for the last month, right? So I should do a little update with my plants. I'm going to have to close my blinds, do some like interlude music. It's getting too hot in here. So I'll be right back.
Yeah, just in a sense, I know when I first had issues, Smart Poker and Crispy definitely encouraged me to show. So people know people have issues throughout the garden, but it sounds like he's just too damn busy to show us. But in the sense of the grow challenge, I'm definitely excited for it. Happy Cultivator was our grow leader in our last challenge. Happy Cultivator. How's it going over there?
Really good, man. Yeah, there's a lot of really good people in there. I've had so much fun getting to know everybody and watching the community grow there and also grow. You know, everybody sharing great information on a weekly basis. You know, like quick to help each other. It's been fun, man. It's been really cool. Great experience.
Yeah, I think you have a light that you got from Dr. MJ Coco. You're going to be sitting up here soon, right?
Most definitely. Thank you so much. That was a very awesome. I'm going to be setting up a 4x4. Yeah, I can't wait. That's really cool. Ear to ear right now.
What light was that again?
It's a Mars Hydro FC 6500.
Have you released a video on that yet?
I've released a video on that like year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago. I'm actually going to do a follow-up video because they made some changes to it. So they recently sent me another one. That's not even the one that Happy Cultivator got. Like
it's beautiful.
A lot of lights. So they sent me another one. That's going to be not my next video, but like coming up probably by the end of this month, I'm going to do a little like update with the FC 6500.
Well, yeah, on the sense we definitely talked about the grow challenge. On the sense of what got me hooked on your website was the grow light calculator. I probably spent an unhealthy amount of time on that page. So a little bit about yourself. You do a lot of reviewing of lights, and I think you have a discount code for almost every single lighting company to help growers save money as well.
A lot of them. The ones that I've reviewed, certainly, not all of them, and some of them have offered, and I'm like, I don't want to. I'm not gonna. Like, I always have this idea of I don't really want to do stuff, put my name on it if it's not a product that like I want people to like end up buying, because like even promoting a discount code or even listing a discount code on the Grow Light Guide page or whatever, people might be like, oh, that must mean that he thinks these are good lights. Well, and I kind of do want it to mean that to some extent, but there's always some question marks there. But yeah. Got a lot of Grow Light discount codes on the Grow Light Guide page for sure. And do Grow Light tests and reviews. All those test reports are published in our Grow Light Guide, and you can like scroll through them. And, you know, I always do my YouTube videos as well.
Yeah, you're part of my lazy growing style. I really tell people, you know, they can yell at me about Samsung diodes and whatever other not the best light, but what I find really, really helpful is just being able to buy a light that you recommend, and then I sit it and forget it. I mean, it's not a thought process. Is it too high? Is it too low? Do I need to turn on the IRs? Or it gets all messy, and you make it easy to sit it and forget it. And that's what I teach on this channel. So I appreciate it. Yeah, cool. I spent a healthy amount of time.
I try to think. I try to give growers the information that growers are really going to need, and you know, not just straight from the company who's always going to be motivated to like, our lights are the best lights. And I like to work with a lot of different brands because I don't want to you know, I want to test them all. I'll tell you how to work with the different ones and let you sort of decide amongst those which one's going to work best for you. There are different sort of selling points for some different lights. Everybody's got a different budget and is somewhat attracted to different things. Fundamentally, though, and I like to sort of point this out, what you're buying is a par map. And, you know, like I said in my recent video, photons are photons. A lot of grow light companies try to pretend like their photons are special and more powerful or somehow going to grow better plants or whatever, but you just need enough of them, really.
No, I agree. I encourage everyone to check out your last video. I mean, like I said, you sent me on a roller coaster of emotions there with that video.
This is my Science of Horticultural Lighting video. Yeah, I just dropped. This is why I'm on screen now. That video is my big sort of unveiling. First time I went face to camera.
Yeah.
And
Well,
people haven't fled yet, so I guess that's a good sign.
I appreciate your time and everything. We probably have another 10 minutes or so. So everybody, make sure you check out all the links that have been linked in there. Check out Smart Poker. And is there anything you feel like on this topic of conspiracies or whatever we're going to call it, you know, is there anything you feel should be said to the kind of growing community? Any kind of public message you got? Put you on the spot a little bit, but there's got to be something you're like, I'm sick of hearing about this. So what is that thorn in your side?
We've covered a lot of things. There's probably more things. Penetration is probably the thing that I'm the most tired of hearing from grow light companies. That's sort of like they're something that they say, you know, or a company just doing something, oftentimes complicated something. To be honest with you, a lot of the tunable spectrum lights are like this. And then they try to convince you that like tuning that spectrum is like super important because it's the thing that grow light does. Yeah, no, I'm a little bit tired of those kinds of things. In a certain sense, I think that the market's a lot better than when I first started reviewing grow lights. And I'm not going to take all of that credit, but the market's a lot better than when I first started reviewing grow lights. They don't make up quite as much rank BS as they used to. And like the par maps that they're publishing are better than they used to be by and large. Like, I mean, it's just, they've cleaned up their act somewhat, but you still definitely run across companies that are trying to convince you that their light is somehow different. Right?
I've seen the pattern in your videos for sure, where or over time as you're doing videos, a lot of companies are actually underrating their efficiency. You're finding a lot of these companies, you're finding more efficiency than they're even rating, where it used to be they were lying out their teeth about it.
Well, in terms of what the calculator is estimating,
yeah,
I've actually thought about that too. I think that we need to make an adjustment to, for a couple of reasons, we need to make an adjustment to the calculated number in particular. So if you're using the grow light calculator and you're using the calculated PPF, it's probably underestimating slightly. I got to go in and change the formulas there a little bit, just because on one side, the grow light companies are being a little bit more legit in how they describe their lights and in the numbers that they're reporting. And on the other side, they're actually getting a little bit better numbers vis-a-vis sort of what those calculated values are. Yeah, so in the calculator on the left there, if let's just plug in some numbers. So let's do a 100-watt light. Let's say that it costs $65. And let's say it has a calculated PPF, or really PPE. So you're going to put this in the micromoles per watt line. Let's say 2.9. That's something a lot of grow lights now advertise as 2.9, and I can explain why they advertise 2.9 if you'd like. But all right, do you hit enter?
Yeah.
Is your grow light calculator not working on your computer these days? Is that what the problem is?
Yeah, I'm on a weird computer, so it's probably on my end, but
Okay, yeah, it's not updating. This is a very
Yeah.
bad sort of demonstration of what
My
the Grow
bad.
Calculator can do.
My bad. You said grow light calculator, and my brain was like, okay, well then I
Let's
should
go
probably
do it. Yeah, no, we're looking into that. I think it's just a caching issue, although I think some other people are having issues. So yeah, you've already told us about that, and we're trying to get that fixed.
Yeah, my bad. You started talking about it, but yeah, definitely I lived there for a long time, and that's really what drew me in. And then I started checking out the chat room, and I think there's a great mixture of, there is some that are elitist, if we're going to use the word elitist, where they're kind of very showy, but there is a spot for everybody to kind of find a place in a community, and then we all come together in these grow challenges, regardless of our opinions on mediums or grow styles. I think it's to really come together and talk about our differences, talk about our conspiracies, our opinions, and there's no shame in that or learning. There's no shame in not knowing.
Yeah.
So
Anyway.
I appreciate your community and everything. And before I let you go, did you want to let people know where they can find you? Maybe some exciting content that's coming up?
Sure. I'm actually working on an article now, an article everybody's been sort of like waiting for forever. So in some future update for me, you'll hear about a new article on Cocoa for Cannabis. I'm working on my next grow light review is going to be the little mini sun from Metagrow. It's a pretty cool and affordable little 3x3 light. And that should be coming out in about 10 days or so, like a little over a week.
Have we locked you
out
down?
My science of horticultural LEDs. This is a video we've been talking about on this show. I've worked on that video for like 6 months and just dropped it last week. So that's sort of like my big news. Now, when I get caught up in a project like that, it becomes the only thing that I work on. I mean, I really am good at single tasking on a project where it's like, I'll work on it all day, every day, but that's the only thing I even think about. Like I forget to eat. And then like everything else kind of like piles up in like a car accident outside, like, waiting for my attention. And so now I'm trying to get back and like pick apart the wreckage to like, pick up all these things that I've been ignoring to do, including my own grow. So my plants are doing fine at this point. They're just took me a while to flip them. So I'll try to update my journal, and you can find me there at Cocoa for Cannabis. Of course, Dr. MJ Cocoa YouTube channel. It's the best places. I'm on Instagram, but Instagram gets a little overwhelming, so I don't get back to as many people's DMs on Instagram as I probably should.
Have we locked you down to join us on this New Year's Grow Challenge? I'll put you on the spot.
Oh yeah, no, guys, I grow in the challenges. I mean, whether or not I keep my journal updated is sort of like another question. But like, it's funny. Jordan asked me the same thing. I'm absolutely growing in the New Year's Grow Challenge. The calendar that we do these grow challenges on is my grow calendar. Like, I start grows, then it really becomes because I take July and the first part of August off, and then I started grow, and that became the PTGC challenge grow. And when that ends in early December, I usually take a couple weeks off over the holidays, and then I started grow, which became the NYGC sort of grow challenge. And I start my second grow of the year almost right on top of the NYGC, so I can finish before it gets too hot in the summer. So that's why the SFAC starts when it does. Like that, it was just like my schedule for growing, and we built them up into like challenges on that schedule. So I'll grow in the NYGC for sure. I've been talking about possibly, I don't think it's going to happen in time for the NYGC, but I've been doing this sort of back and forth with our friend Jordan River about both of us growing cuts from the same plant. And he wants to, he's one of these people that believes that growing the plant organically will produce a better quality flavor. So I told him that we gotta have a challenge and that we're both going to grow cuts from the same plant. And then we're going to like invite everybody to meet up and have a big smoke out where you can try all the bud that Jordan grew and all the bud that I grew.
I always imagined you having a bunch of tents, and it sounds like maybe you have some restricted real estate.
And no, I don't have a huge need for production. I don't sell anything that I grow. I give some stuff away to some people, but I mean, it's like I don't need to overproduce. For when we did the challenges, like the first 2 years of doing challenges, I overproduced a lot. I had to downsize my tent because even just having a 4x4, I was producing like pounds more on an annual basis than I could use, than I really needed. So it's just about that. It's just about sort of how much do I actually need. I grow fairly small grows, so I can just grow with everybody all the time.
Yeah, I guess I had an image of you as some mad scientist circled by a bunch of lights giggling, because you have so many lights. I couldn't resist not wanting to grow with every single one of them. Well, like this came out real good.
I have so many lights. I have an area in my dining room that's designated to store lights. But to be honest with you, here in my office, like I have a pretty big, like what I call my office, but it's also, I grow at the far end of it. The curtain kind of cuts us off from that. And in between like my desk here where I'm sitting and the grow at the other end is my light testing station. The light testing station takes up far more real estate than my grow does at this point. So like it just in terms of like, space and how much I've committed to different activities, I've got, 40 square feet for light testing.
I'm sorry, I have somebody at my door.
Only 10 square feet right now for my grow.
Sorry, somebody's at my door. I'm just gonna have HWGGTrim take over.
Okay.
That's interesting. So you got a stack of lights taking up a big portion of your dining room?
It's taking up a portion of it. I still have a light. I have no idea what. I'm gonna have to find somebody local. It's a 5x5 light that's 120 centimeters by 120 centimeters, or 4x4, like any other basically 5x5 light, except this does not disassemble and it does not fold.
Oh, so it's like big in width and oh geez.
It's just big and solid and flat. So it's like 4 feet by 4 feet by 2 inches.
Oh wow.
I mean, I don't know how I would ever sort of ship that anyplace, and I didn't want to. Shipping lights, by the way, I always pay for like the shipping fees when we do like the giveaways after I test the light, and that's like the most expensive part of the whole thing is like paying for those shipping fees. It's like $60-$70 sometimes. Shipping this light would be a lot of money. Like I don't want to pay to ship the light, so we're gonna have to find some local person that wants it. And I got some other lights. That light Happy that you just got had been in the dining room for a while, so now
that's awesome. I can't wait to set it up, man. It's gonna be cool. I'm gonna cram it in this little room,
putting it to better use than leaning up against the wall in the dining room for sure.
My first light with bars too, so it's pretty exciting. Have a bigger space to grow in. Yeah, really excited. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, and you're putting in a 4x4, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna put that in a 4x4.
Yeah, so that's what I'm going to test it. I'm going to test it. I'll probably do a test in a 5x5 just so I can compare it to my old test in a 5x5. But I'm also going to test in a 4x4 because increasingly people are getting these, 600 watt plus lights, which even like a year ago, 2 years ago, people only got them for 5x5s. But now they've come down in price enough where it's really affordable to put them in a 4x4 and get really excellent coverage in the 4x4, right? So I didn't test it that way, and that seemed like a reasonable enough reason to test it again.
Thank you. Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate that. I love that. Set it and forget it. I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see you set up that 4x4 for sure. But
yeah, I can't wait.
In the sense of efficiency, I find it better, obviously, if you don't have to run your light at max. But on your Smart 8, your Medic Grow Smart 8, there was a par map you had in there at, I think it was 60% power in a 4x4. I don't want to misquote it, but it was, I think, 12 inches. 15 inches.
12.
That's crazy. Like, what was the watt?
It covers. I mean, it absolutely covers that footprint at 12 inches. I mean, above 500s in the corners.
Yeah,
that's 60% power. You can also run the Smart 8 at 80% power in a 4x4, but it's got to be at a much higher hanging height. You get an average higher PPFD, but that gives you some flexibility that if you do have to dim it, you can still get excellent coverage across the canopy and run it within 12 inches. Yeah, really efficient. And that's it. Like, you know, if you are downsizing, it's a big change. A lot of growers don't realize how much you have to sort of change things if you go from a 5x5 to a 4x4. But like the hanging height and the dimmer percentage is not going to be the same. It's not like there's something magical about the hanging height that's just like the hanging height for that light. Talk to commercial growers that sometimes think that too. Like this is just it has to be exactly 2 feet above the canopy, otherwise we're not going to grow big. Like, no, we just need to have the PPFD right. It doesn't matter how high the light's above the canopy. No, it's got to be like 2 feet. It's like somehow they got that in their head, and they will. It's like a they will not let go of that. It's just all about the PPFD.
After 700, there's not like a grave increase anyways after 700 density. But in the sense of hang heights, I do fall into an issue when using your par maps for some growers. In the sense, I'll say, it's a 16.5 inch hang height, but I've met them at a point where I was not having them train their plants properly, so they have spheres in the air. So what do? Do you sacrifice their bottoms? If you don't have that flat canopy, how do you do 16.5 inches?
It's almost always better to be higher. So that's the other thing. Oh, this is a good question, GG. Treat that optimal hanging height as really the minimum hanging height. If I tested a light at 16 inches and that's what gave you 1,000 ppfd in the middle, then that's the minimum hanging height. It's almost always better to be a little bit higher than the minimum hanging height, because you get better distribution and the fall off in average PPFD. See, as you raise the light, the average PPFD is going to go down because more light is reflecting off the walls, and it's going to slightly decrease the PPF, the usable PPF that arrives to the canopy, but slightly. But as you raise it up, the distribution becomes much better. So it's usually worth a little bit of PPF in order to get a better distribution. And the drop off in PPF is really small. So having your lights a few inches higher is pretty much always the answer. If height is an option still, if you're in one of these situations where you can't raise the light anymore because you got to the top of the tent and you still got these, colas that are sticking up towards it, at that point, that becomes like the sacrifice zone, I think. So I wouldn't dim the light. Dimming the light will reduce your harvest everywhere. I'd try to train the plants out to maintain that minimum distance, right? If it's 16 inches, you're going to try to train the plants down so you have at least 16 inches. But if that becomes impossible, then maybe moving the plant off to the side or the cola off to the side would be possible. But if even that's impossible, I'd just be like, all right, well, that one cola is going to get light burn.
Or grow through the light and get nothing at the top and light burn at the side.
Yeah, what happens with that one. But, I'm going to sacrifice that one to keep the rest as big and beautiful as possible.
So you're saying, in the sense of, I guess, a broad statement, less is more. Don't get too hyper-focused on it have to be 16.5 inches. It's okay to have a little.
If it's 16.5 is your minimum, then 18 is better if you have 18.
Now, is there a way to take your par map as well? Like I said, I use your map to teach a lot of people about their lights. So I run into an issue, an instance like the TS1000 in a 3x3 space. You have it for a flower space, but there's no dimming table. So people that buy those small spaces usually are starting with that one light, that TS1000. So it's like, and then I'm just making a broad statement, I'll say, 25% at 27 inches, just trying to undercut it. Like you said, less is more.
Well, if you change the height, you're going to change everything. And you're just sort of guessing at that point. If all you do is change the dimmer, then you can make more educated guesses about it.
I see.
Most dimmers are reasonably accurate. I mean, not great, but like reasonably accurate. So a good rule is your PPF and your PPFD are gonna be, a little bit higher than your dimmer setting as long as your dimmer setting is not at 100. At 100, they're going to be 100. But if you dim it down to 50%, you're going to have like 55 to 60% of the PPFD you would have had at 100%. So if 100% at 18 inches is 1,000, then 50% at 18 inches is going to be like 550, maybe 580. It's not going to be 500. It's going to be more than 500, but close.
No, I like what you say, you know, take that tested hang height and kind of dim down from there. Then you could really just read the plant, you know, and go under what you think it is. And it's better to be under and kind of try to correct from there than burn the crap out of your seedlings.
Real says most dimmers aren't even close percentage wise if you check with a watt meter. I check every single light that I test, and they are. I mean, there's a few that are pretty bad. I've certainly gotten dimmers that aren't very accurate, but most of them are pretty accurate. Most of the fixtures that I've tested, like at 50%, like anywhere from 42 to like 58 would be the range that I would say most of the light fixtures are coming in at. So not super accurate, but better than a phone app being used as a light meter.
Yeah.
I mean, let me just say that again. Like doing these calculations or making educated guesses based on known values is going to be much more accurate than trying to measure the light yourself with a camera.
Yeah. No,
really
I fell into that loop as well. I fell into it as well. So I'm glad you touched on that as well. But I love your calculator. I mean, it's helped a lot of the growers sit it and forget it. This is Happy Cultivator's third grow in here, and he started over on Cocoa for Cannabis as a grow leader, and he's been sharing this knowledge. And it's cool how you teach us, and then we teach other people, and that's that community we're trying to build.
Yep, love it.
Love it. It looks good. It looks like you signed a poster for him too.
Oh yeah, thank you.
It does look. Yeah,
there's one up here.
Cool to get
I got one.
Of information from the both of you.
I didn't sign mine.
I
should
Why is it crooked?
Send it around and have all of you guys sign it.
It looks crooked. Is it crooked?
Send it around. Yeah.
No, mine's not crooked. My camera is just crooked. Like if I turn my camera towards the thing, I guess it would look.
Yeah. You're right. Your camera might be crooked. That's a new one.
It's not. It's like the angle of things or something. I don't know.
Yeah. No, we usually run our show a little past 2 hours, and
it's already. Yeah, I've got another show, so I should probably tell people about that. I do a Sunday show every week on the Cheap Home Grow channel. It's called the Growing with My Fellow Growers show. Cool panel. We've been doing that for Jesus. I think we're coming up on our 4th year.
And what was the name of that channel? Happy Cultivator's been putting stuff in chat along with Smart Poker and
Cheap
everything.
Home Grow is the name of the channel. On Cheap Home Grow channel, the Growing with My Fellow Growers show. I really do think we're coming up on our 4th anniversary of that show.
What will you be talking about over there on his show?
I have no idea.
Isn't that fun?
I'm gonna go on camera for the first time ever, so I'm gonna try to commandeer that and make the whole show about my new LED video. No, I'm teasing.
It's an amazing video, though. Definitely, you guys should check that out. Hardcore. From what I'm told, I haven't looked, but I was told we hit 2K subscribers. So thanks, GG family. What an event.
During the show?
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. Well, everybody, if you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe to the HempWithGG YouTube channel. I look down at my screen and it says subscribed on it. Yeah, be sure to give the thumbs up to the video and all of that. Thanks for having me on, GG. And Happy Cultivator. I'm looking forward to seeing the FC 6500 set up, and I'm sure you're going to crush it just as you've been crushing it with that.
Thank you so much.
Octopus, the Magobe light you're using there.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
That's like a $200 light with your code and everything. But what was going to happen?
Yeah, and that's the other thing to remind people of. This, as we get in, if you're looking for grow lights, this is the time to buy them, or we're coming at least close to the time to buy them. A lot of grower light companies are going to be having their best sales for Black Friday, or sort of as we approach Black Friday. So, yeah, be on the lookout for that. I get overwhelmed with requests in October for people that are like, "Oh, can you do our video in November? Can you do our video in November?" Everybody wants to promote their Black Friday sales. So indeed, I know a bunch of them are planning pretty big promotions.
People are moving inside now. Before I let you go, on our November 20th, 4 p.m. EST, we're going to start doing giveaways. And I know you volunteered to give away consultation. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. People can meet with me if they'd like to. Do some cultivation consultation. I do this with commercial clients, a number of commercial farms, call me up, ask me questions. I work with some much more than with others, but it'll just be a chance to do some one-on-one. You can ask me whatever kind of questions you want, help you get set up for your grow or anything else.
Heck yeah. Well, I appreciate your time here. I appreciate the time you're offering for the 2K giveaway. And of course, I appreciate all the subscribers. Anything else you want to add before you leave us, sadly?
Before I leave you sadly, hopefully I won't leave you sadly. Hopefully I'll leave you joyously and enthusiastically.
Yes.
It's been a fun show. You keep me on my toes.
Is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah, interesting questions. I hope I did the questions justice. I finally figured out how to sort of watch the YouTube chat and see the live feed of our StreamYard sort of presentation. So I think I've got used to the thing here. I hope everybody liked the show. I think this is a cool show, and I hope everybody subscribes. And I'm stoked. Congratulations on hitting your 2K.
Thank you, Doc. You and the community, Cocoa for Cannabis. I know you gave me the first light to start a video on. So it's really a community that builds a village, and that's damn true.
Yeah.
I appreciate
and here's one some people might not know. We're doing a trim bag giveaway over on Grow Sponsor right now. That goes down in just a couple of days. So bust over to growsponsor.com and hit the giveaway tab and register for that. It's very much like we do the Grower Love giveaways at Cocoa for Cannabis, but it's ending on November 9th. So cool trim bag giveaway if you want to win one of those.
Heck yeah. And I don't want to let you go, but on the sense you do run a Grow Sponsor, and I have a common question asked to me by a lot of people, how did I get sponsored? How do I have so many codes and companies working with me? So how do people get involved in that if they are a YouTuber watching this and they want to sign up?
They put out amazing content like you do, HempWithGG. It would be hard for some to, I think, follow in your path. You've blazed such a wonderful trail there. But so Grow Sponsor, we work with social media influencers, people like HempWithGG and Spot Poker and some other people in the Cocoa for Cannabis community and beyond to arrange product evaluation. So we work with companies too. It started because Photon Tech, who I had been reviewing with, asked me if I'd help them find other people to do reviews and to do the product evaluation videos and Instagram posts and stuff like that. So we started, working with that, and then brought in some other companies that were interested in doing the same thing. Would think of ourselves as working sort of in the interest of the growers, of the influencers, finding opportunities for you to work with sponsors and making sure that you're getting good deals. Because there's a bunch of companies out there that try to give you some cheap free piece of equipment and lock you up to an exclusive contract for a year or two or whatever. We tried to just.
No, you're a great in between. Me and Happy were talking before the show, before you even joined, about how you're like kind of an agent where you make sure both sides are getting what they want. You don't have a hungry influencer that just wants a free item, but you don't have a company that's going to take advantage of someone. So I appreciate you taking care of the hard work for me.
Yeah. But in order to sort of qualify for that, first thing I would say is get a YouTube channel and start making YouTube content that people want to watch. That's sort of the path in. That's why you're doing shows like this. That's why you do videos like this, right? YouTube is just a much better sort of place to do this. Instagram works. You got to have so many more followers and do so much more sort of on an Instagram to be sort of successful as a product evaluator, though. So
In a sense, in this show, we all watch the chat and everything, and in a sense, we're not looking for directly negativity, but I like having people in the chat that have different opinions, and I think even if they say they're not learning something, they maybe pick up something. And like I said, you coming out with your video and attacking so many great topics that I try to stray away from is what made me want to do this video, and it's what has my other ideals planned as well, is to attack some of this stigmatism head on. So I appreciate you again. I know I keep doing like 6 outros, and that's because we don't want to let you go, but I know you got things to do.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure out what's going on with chat. Hopefully you guys are okay over there in chat.
That's wild, man. They get crazy over there.
They get crazy. I've enjoyed the show. GG, Happy Cultivator. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Thank you so much.
Meet me over at the Growing with My Fellow Grower show on the Cheap Home Grow channel at the top of the hour here. We'll be going back on there. And until then, I'm going to go rest and recover and maybe get a little bit to eat. But thanks for having me on again, and grower love to everybody out there.
Grower love, Doc. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.
With that said, Happy Cultivator, I'll pass it to you. You can go ahead and maybe tell us what you got going on in your tent and give us spots we can find you.
Okay, so you can find me here in a minute at the Cheap Home Grow show. Whenever that starts, I just posted the link in chat. And you can find me out here on YouTube or at Cocoa for Cannabis and Happy Cultivator. And thank you for having me on. Thank you for having Coco on. That was awesome, man. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, very cool.
Some topics we really touched on for sure. I like touching on.
They're controversial. That's why we put it out like that. I know a lot of people are. There's a diverse, amount of people that are in our chats. Like some people, from Grow Boss. It was pointed out they just don't. So that's why we were covering that. That's why we were showing you even from that perspective that it's still. I don't think one thing was recommended.
Cooking for cannabis is melting pot, man, and that's what it's about.
Exactly. So nothing that we covered today was like, hey, you should do that. You should get side lights. You should, so that was kind of the point of the show, to see it from a perspective of somebody with that much intellect that could bring it to us and say, hey, here's the, so yeah, it was cool to see that. It was very cool.
People are loving your garden, by the way. I think it's beautiful.
That's what I took from it. I didn't take that there was anything that, like any of the topics that we covered that, hey, I should do that, or I should do that, or I should do that. So it was really neat to get that cleared up,
What week are you in, Happy?
Second week.
Second week. Nice. Nice. Will you be doing any shows coming up here that we can see this garden more? Wednesday. Maybe talk about it a bit more later on your channel?
Yep. Next Wednesday we will, 3 o'clock.
Sounds like a plan, man.
7 Eastern.
Yeah. Well, I'm Hemp with GG. I've been putting out videos almost every 2, if not every 3 days. So definitely you know where to find me. We hit 2K here, so it's kind of ironic. I started on Cocoa for Cannabis and I end at 2,000 on Cocoa for Cannabis as well. But make sure you guys show up for the 2K giveaway. We got Waxit grinder, LighterBro, dry flower hanging kit, Hemper box. We got Chad Westport with seeds. We got even some Cocoa for Cannabis members that are offering seeds. We also have other people offering just time and consultations. I mean, it's going to be a crazy day, crazy giveaway. So make sure you guys are there. As always, keep growing happy, healthy plants. Growers love, everyone.
Growers love.